We're just making koala bears that we just put into the lion's den, like nonstop, right? Like if we need.
That's a hell of a metaphor.
It is.
This is Lyle Benjamin from Montana. You are listening to the Vance Crowe podcast.
Jason Mauck, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm glad you're here. You have been the talk of the town. When it became official that you were coming on my podcast, I started putting out feelers, and a lot of people had questions for you just kind of in back channels. But one of my friends in particular, a woman named Kate Crosby, who you don't know probably, she lives out in California. She's a plant breeder that does phenomenal research, like mind-blowing stuff. Was over the moon that I was gonna talk with you because she has been watching you from afar and says that the things that you're pushing on the edges are really, really interesting. And so I feel a great deal of pressure to be able to help you articulate the crazy farming that you're doing out in the world, because Kate was over the moon about you.
Awesome. Let's get into it.
So you're not a regular farmer. I mean, you're a farmer that farms corn and soy, but you don't do it like other people. What's your deal?
It's just to me, it's just holes in the bottom of a bucket everywhere. And, you know, when I grew up, literally, I would steal seeds out of the grain bin, and I would have like 30 fields throughout our property. Like I would farm like a little corner. And I had all these little crops, and then I would take like the cat's manure and stuff. And that's just what I did growing up. And then I started, you know, I went to get a real job, and I just wanted to be a landscaper. So I spent about 7 or 8 years being a landscaper, had some bad things happen with the family. So I came to the farm, and it was like, well, this is what we do. We grow this one crop. And then it's just like nothing for 8 months. I'm just like, you got to be kidding me. And that's just kind of led to my happiness, if you will, as I started experimenting and learning kind of in kind of the farming.
You do seem very happy. You have a Twitter feed that is always talking about the various things that you're doing. And really, as deep as I know you, is that you grow corn and soy in the same field. The soybeans go in between the corn fields. And at my first look at it, it's like, oh, that's neat. But I hear other people that think you're a crazy person. They think you're nuts.
Right. And that's good. That's good.
What are you doing out there with corn and soy in between the rows?
So it's changed. Like initially, before I started polycropping, I thought that you could physically just produce more, and maybe you can somewhat if you kind of collect light on times when the crops aren't normally doing it. But it all comes down to elasticity. That's why I speak about it quite a bit. So the best way to describe it is Amazon mentality. So Amazon does not care if you buy Crest or Colgate. They just want to sell you more toothpaste. Well, as farmers, we're just happy collecting sun at full canopy, maybe 70 or 80 days a year. Well, if you can collect more sun, then it's just like Amazon getting 21% of your income instead of 16%. So every crop it has like brains on it, like animals, and they're constantly figuring out day in and day out as context change how much it can produce. So through time and space, if you kind of this be the ball mentality, you can figure out how to increase unit evaluation. So by making a bouquet based on time and space and what's going to happen, you can just produce more with less, which is the main idea here is banding things and getting more out of entities.
And when you're saying I want to get more out of the sunlight, are you saying I want to have more valuable days that we're getting, where we want to get into the fields earlier and leave later?
More days, more shape. So imagine you're just driving on I-80, okay, dead flat. That's 100%. So in my presentations, I have a picture, linear sun capture. What if you are in Asheville, North Carolina, and you want to get to Chattanooga or Gatlinburg? The bird flies 12 miles, you get in your car and it's 36. So if you can completely change the shape, then that plant is going to draw more energy and have more energy collectively into the soil.
And when you're thinking about this is stuff that you're researching, or you're just going out there and trying, like, how are you constructing these experiments that you're doing?
Well, I'm ADHD, but I'm also very patient. So everything is a 3 to 5 year deal. So I have an initial idea. I do it at a small scale and then I make it bigger. And then I'm constantly criticizing, not really criticizing, but just figuring out what I should do next. So it's actually, when I first started doing this, I was really mad that like it wasn't taking off. that grandpa thought I was nuts. But then I realized that there's not a lot of other people doing it. So you're in this space by yourself. So there's no like speed to figure it out. You can just get collectively better and better and better. And as you get something better at something, now you can start investing and making that more efficient. So it's just allowed you to just be you, and it's fun.
So let's go back to that beginning. Yeah. What were some of the first experiments? What were the first thing you were doing saying, hey, we're going to try this differently?
Well, first it was just wheat and soybeans. And I was selling for a little regional company called Broadbeck, and they were coming up with these enlist soybeans. So you could spray wheat herbicide on soybeans. I'm like, well, this is a no-brainer. We'll just put them back out there, spray it once, and be good. And initially, I didn't realize that compromise was a big part of it. So my rows were too narrow on the wheat, and I choked out the soybeans too much, and it just didn't really work out. And there was a moment when I was out there that first season, I was like, this is a stupid idea. But what I learned is all the actual imperfections is where I learned, where I drove and I terminated the wheat. The soybeans were just so much more vigorous where it had opportunity. So where I've really learned is through my screw ups, if you will, through my fat rows or where I ran over it. And it's been constantly figuring out, okay, where's the solar rays hitting? How much water do we get? How does that plant feel? How deep are the roots? So you start getting a feel for the seasons, and you feel like you're kind of building an armor as you figure out kind of, to me, it's really comes down to mathematics, just finite mathematics.
And are you sitting there doing the mathematics?
It's just more through just watching. I mean, it's just like if you're a pro athlete, you don't think about, Tiger Woods doesn't think about, 90 degrees. Once he gets good at something, it just becomes instinctual, which takes repetition, which takes, a lifetime of doing it.
Yeah. So I started doing jujitsu. I talk about this quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, you could read jujitsu, you could read thousands and thousands of pages, and it doesn't matter until you get in there and you actually try it. And the people that are really great can do both the math, the logic part of jujitsu, and then the physical part. Mm-hmm. But I think for the most part, you have to have a feel for it. Otherwise, you'll never be truly great at it.
Yeah.
And so when you have this first fail, is your family giving you a hard time? I mean, is this hurting your bottom line, or is it making it difficult?
That's the whole point of the incubator. So it can start in a garden just on a corner, and then the next year it may scale times 20, and it might scale, infinitely. But when you start small, you can do 1,000 experiments in an acre. So that's basically what I do is I spend all winter all cooped up with my ADHD, and I come up with ideas, and I just try to scatter tadpoles. And I'm like, let stuff happen. Let's see what happens, what tadpoles hop into my, patio in April. But it's that patience plus the ADHD that gets you kind of, and it's change. I think that's the most important part of getting to where you want to go.
And so where is it that you're trying to get to?
So I've fascinated with kind of the sharing economy, the Airbnb idea of not really owning anything, just connecting things. So I've kind of came my logic, and I kind of come up with tangents here, but I've got 3 triangles. First is the triangle offense, which is Tex Winners, Chicago Bulls, or Airbnb. It's just need, consumer, end user. Sorry, same thing. Supply, end user. But the 2 spectrums that are really important in ag is the spectrum of what the industry says you need to do. The BMP says you need to spray this to kill
the BMP?
This. The best management practice.
Oh, okay.
So anything that you can replace the best management practice with just a natural system is value to the farmer. So if I'm removing animals from a barn, I can come up with some awesome widget to hold the door open, or I could just put a rock there. Just simple, dumb observations that most people are so into just looking at field view and looking at the numbers instead of just getting out of their truck and looking at things. So the more of that you can implement into a system, the more value. The other one is unit valuation. So you see that beer at a ball game, right? You want to get a buzz, it's going to be $15 a beer. You get 3 of them, you got a slight buzz, you got $50, $45 out of your pocket. You can go down to the county liquor store and spend $5 and get a buzz, right? So the same ounce of Miller Lite is evaluated 1,000 or 1,500 times %. Same thing happens in plants. So when you combine these 2 spectrums from replacing BMPs and actually accomplishing the same need with something natural, plus unit evaluation, it has this force multiplier effect. And that's where all the value comes, is saying, instead of being plugged into big ag, be like, I need this $10 million balance sheet of all these John Deere tire tits just going around, everything brand new and debt up to my eyeballs. I just figure out how to naturally put things together. So then you start bringing in what's happening to the end product, like manure, what's happening to energy, and you start kind of plugging in the same matrix, if you will, on these other industries, because it's all connected.
And so what are you doing with manure?
So in our area, as you go north and west, there are literally 2, 3, 4 barns every square mile. They're everywhere. It just smells like manure. So all of our subsidies and everything is just said, grow corn, grow corn, grow corn. If you look on a map, we have the highest basis around because we just have this drain. We feed so many animals. But what's happened, it was great 10, 15, 20 years ago. But as we built more and more barns, our phosphorus levels went through the roof. So now we have all these real estate developments around lakes, and they're green. The algae blooms are toxic. There's antibiotics in the water systems. There's all kinds of things happening from just bad distribution. And
I would say that you are literally the first farmer that I've ever heard say that the green lakes are the phosphorus from farming, and that these things are happening as a result, and antibiotics in the water as a result of farmers. Like they don't say that. That's not. As people really dislike you if you say that.
Exactly. Look. People are just in camps. There's not many people that aren't in the safe tent. But in reality, I mean, if you make more blacktop, the city's going to be hotter. I mean, it's just simple science. And you see it. You just physically see it does not make sense. If you just go back in the time machine into the 40s, everyone had cows they milked. They had pigs. They had this nuclear, like what's the beavers? Like it was this nuclear farm, and everything has been just completely ripped apart, and the distribution is so jacked up. And there's a guy in Illinois right now that's got 5 foot of topsoil, and he wakes up in April and he says, time to plant corn. And he does it as fast as he can, and that's all he worries about. And there's so many people doing that.
And you think this is like a dead end, or one that, like, what do you think is the consequence of that?
I just think it's more primed every day to be exploited by the sharing economy. It's like you can't build scarcity if there's piles.
When you're talking about this sharing economy within farming, what do you mean?
Well, first off, knowledge. So if you're open, there's so many people that, especially 2 or 3 years ago, would approach me before I really was allowed to talk at places, and they said, "Why do you keep putting all this stuff up for free? You need to be charging for it."
This is actually, I heard this comment about you this morning. I think he should hide some of that stuff. He shares too much. Right.
But that is marketing, is plugging in. I want to make a connection with you, with everyone. And now you just have so many more options. It's like, and you go back to that unit evaluation. Now your time is so much more valuable because it's all about reduction and not production anymore, if that makes much sense. By saying, no, I don't have to go do this thing that I can replace my time with a $12 an hour job. Now I say no to that. I think that's what you strive to do. And the reason why that's connected with sharing everything is as you share, you add value, and people value your time more.
Are people doing the things that you're trying out?
Yeah. And in certain ways, I mean, it's not scaled. And again, it goes back to how subsidized and rules and crop insurance. And
so tell me about that. We got time. What tell me, like, the subsidies are making this happen. Tell me more.
Yeah. So, I mean, your mail money or candy or whatever you want to call it, you can tell I got a little slant on it, but it says, look, Vance, you've grown corn the last 10 years, and let's take out your worst year and your best year, and you average 200 bushels per acre. Next year, the February average price is $4 an acre. We're going to guarantee you $800 an acre times what year is your insurance you want to buy, and you say 80%. You get $800 an acre to do what you got to do. And there's so many riders, but the problem is not that. The problem is it's not true actuary science. So there's this prorated subsidy that's intercharged from the federal government into that solution. So your 75% is almost nearly purely subsidized by the government.
You're saying that the insurance itself is subsidized by the government.
It should be $75 an acre, and it's 17.
I see. So you could take on a lot more insurance because you're not covering the cost.
Right. So everything is, after a few years, is exploited. So it might say this is helping young farmers, but really what it does is I farm 14,000 acres. Now I can take on another 3, and I don't have to worry about completely getting a goose egg here. Worst case scenario, I lose a little. So you can basically just play on the side. It's like being in Vegas on penny slots. I can sit there and drink house whiskey and get hammered, hoping that 1 year out of 2 we get a drought, corn goes to $7, and now I farm the world and I can make it kick.
And you think that this is propping up a system that's not good?
Yeah, it just needs to be true risk like it used to be.
I mean, I totally believe in that.
Build resiliency.
I think so. One of my biggest fears in our society is the number of people that are taking on debt to go to school, right? Mm-hmm. So they take on tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. But the risk was all taken out of that game. When I was in college, 2002, probably you and I are about the same age, the Bush administration came out and said, we're going to try and make college more accessible for people. So one of the ways that we're going to do this is by taking it off and saying you can't declare bankruptcy on your loans, which meant now if a bank can get money to a student through a school, mm-hmm. it is a risk-free loan, right? They are going to get that money. They can garnish your wages, which meant then that the school no longer had a reason to control prices, and the students weren't having somebody that was in the real world reality check like, hey, that degree probably won't do the return on investment that you're talking about. And since no one was on the hook for it except for that 18-year-old, we've let it explode. I think that is it when I think inflation is a very serious problem in the United States. And I think there's 2 places that I can say for sure that I see it showing up, which is student loans and land prices. Because it doesn't make sense to me. I don't know. And healthcare. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, 3.
Yeah, I mean, when you send out a tweet that says more cash is coming, you do that 3 times, it's not going to the farmer. It's just going towards to prop up the whole supply, the landlords, everything. I mean,
but even in that, I mean, one of the things that I'm always cautious of is like my overly simplistic view on how things work. I mean, there is a reason why we want our ag system to be extremely resilient and why we would keep pumping money into that. And it's because that is the major driver of our economy. I mean, that's what gives us the huge advantage over everybody else. So I'm cautious about saying, I mean, there's good things about
spurring on economies of scale. Don't get me wrong. But there needs to be checks and balances. You need to be able to basically run the screen pass against the blitz. And if you've got piles of corn and you can't get rid of it, what really bothers me is you go to the coffee shop and we're worried about China. Why aren't we just worried about what your neighbor's doing, how he's feeling or whatever? And it's just like, we produced it. This is our God-given right. You take it.
Oh, interesting. There was a huge pile of corn for a while. I mean, I think if you're not in farming, so a significant portion of my audience not in farming at all, and they don't realize that 2 years ago we had so much corn, it was like coming out of our ears. China had so much corn. Is that gone now? Is it
I mean, it's coming down somewhat. Hopefully you can tell my distaste towards pushing that ball up the hill.
Yeah. What would you do instead? What I'm hearing you say is, I wish there was more risk in the market so that if people have skin in the game, sometimes they'll be losers, but then that's how you have changeover. That's how you have people doing new things.
My big thing is we should be wanting more farmers. We should be wanting to get the community involved on our acres. And we have all of this policy spurred on just competition. I can basically gobble up and combine mine with this, and now we just have these mega farms. But in reality, if we just look at the ash trees, I don't know if you have that around.
Oh, the ash borer, yeah. I mean, we don't have that problem here, as far as I know. But
they're all
familiar
gone in
with
Indiana, and it's just not natural. We've robbed so many acres from all these crops to grow more corn. I know industry has figured out ways to make everything out of corn, but
it is a pretty magical crop, right? It is pretty magical in that it is probably the best as far as collecting solar radiation and turning it into storable, transportable energy. There's corn and sugarcane, right? Maybe there's something else out there, but it is a very powerful conversion.
Yeah.
So your problem is more with how the system is stacked up to make a few big winners and a lot of other people just locked out of the game.
Yeah, I mean, everybody can know the rules of the game and go about it. I'm just thinking long term. We're just getting more division in defending and I think just in general, I'm just more about free market and just you need some checks and balances in there.
So when you have a company called Constant Canopy. First of all, why did you name it that?
I was going to call it Occupy for about a week, and didn't really.
What was your timing on that?
Yeah, right then. And it was something Constant Canopy unleashes progress, and just Constant Canopy sounded better.
And so people bring you in to try and say, "Hey, I want to try some different things, or I want to try some experiments." What's that?
Well, basically, so I kind of reconnected with an old college friend a couple years ago, and as I was starting to get attention, he's like, "Man, we can really start doing projects." So we just tap into our networks to basically start getting the ball rolling forward on bigger ideas and projects.
So what are some of the bigger ideas that you're excited about?
Well, of course, with the relay cropping, there's developing equipment around scaling it to make it go faster to, I'm all into less trips across the field. We're producing biochar from the manure, which we can put around nitrogen to.
So explain that. When you're saying biochar, what do you mean?
So just a quick kind of and dirty on our manure project. So as you really start condensing these livestock barns, you have a ton of manure around. Ton of manure around one area. So we have an open contract with guys that we take 20% of their manure for the right to bring it there. And then we can clean the methane out and inject that natural gas right into the pipeline. And that's basically traded in the California market. The smell of money, if you will, can be converted into natural gas. From there,
you already have the digester to do that?
That's the project we're working on now. So basically we're taking bits and pieces of different projects and we're putting all this technology into one to have this scalable solution. And we basically want to take all these nutrients that are just blindly produced and distributedly bad and get it into forms that we can get into all these different industries and distribute that in 10 or 100 times more acres, different applications. Like you may have your lawn applied with a fertilizer coated with this manure biochar, so that phosphorus and nitrogen doesn't get in the storm drain.
Interesting. So how far away is that from going live?
We're hoping to be taking in manure by next spring.
Oh, that's by 2021?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what are the steps that you have to work on between then and now?
It's mostly scientific stuff. So messing with formulations. So it gets pretty complicated in the economics. California has this program they call carbon intensity matrix. So renewable natural gas is one of the highest negative numbers. So if you're a corporation like UPS and you burn diesel in your trucks, you accrue so much sin, if you will. So
that's exactly how I think of it. Sin.
Yeah. So you need to acquire so much of this renewable natural gas to offset that. So we have to figure out how much hemp are we going to put in the digester, how much cow manure, how much pig manure to get the right score with the right amount of gas. So we're kind of cooking up mixes with that. We're figuring out.
Your phone's going crazy, man.
I thought it was off. Let me turn it off.
That's all right.
Okay. How's that?
There you go. Wow.
Okay, so where was I on?
You were putting together hemp oil and cow manure and trying to make the right formulation to get the sin tax away.
So with the CBD thing, you have these processes and they're squeezing out the hemp oil, and then what do they do with all this bran and sticks? You can give it to a digester. So there's all kinds of connections.
No way.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So there's all kinds of connections that you make, and we have all these concrete bins so we can source carbon from all these different industries and add that to kind of make this mix. So we not only get the natural gas out of there. So basically we're pumping same natural gas that's natural gas out of pig manure, but we're just net metering it, and we just keep track of that.
My brother, Dan Crowe, was on Twitter this morning talking about the beneficial electrification. Have you seen about how there's cities now that are banning natural gas?
I have not.
It started in California, I think, where they're saying new construction, specifically in homes, can't have natural gas because that's actually where the leaks happen. So you burn natural gas, it's really good. It's a high burn rate. But if you have any kind of leaks around any one of your seals, and it doesn't take much to not be dangerous, but yet still be emitting. And I think people are going to be surprised when they wake up and they find out there are a lot of cities that have started to ban the use of natural gas. I would be so pissed if that happened.
Yeah.
Because cooking on natural gas is like 100 times better than cooking on electric.
Yeah.
But you've not heard of that?
Yeah. I've not heard that.
Well, I think it's coming, man.
Well, this is all going to be that compressed natural gas for mostly to replace diesel. I mean, the push is towards electric, but to get that torque, it's kind of the new kind of green.
And does this, so compressed natural gas, does that mean you'll be able to put it in tankers, or how will you transport it? Can it go through a pipeline if it's compressed natural gas?
That's later in the process. You would just put it in natural gas, and there's a company called Kinetrix that does that in Indianapolis. There's companies in we just basically physically need to make more natural gas.
It seems to me
we're just
like
bottling the farts, if you will, and getting value out of it.
It seems to me that you have turned what would be a really severe handicap for a lot of people, the attention bouncing around, into value. Have you always been that way? Was your ADHD a problem before, and you learned how to do this, or have you always...
I would usually just work. Just work a lot. And that's when you start kind of seeing value, like when people invite you somewhere and pay you for your time, or if you get a connection that helps this guy. And then when you get this new dopamine, if you will, now everybody that you see, you want to make a really good conversation with. You want to talk to them again. And I think I've just kind of replaced a drug with another drug, if you will. And
that's interesting.
Yeah.
That this is the drug that comes from figuring out what people's problems are and solving them in a novel way.
So when I first came on, they're like, who is this guy with his markers? And, I was using crayons because my kids were little. So I had all these, these feeble ways of articulating my ideas.
And you're putting them out on Twitter right?
And I'm just machine gun. And the people that says don't share, they think you're going to like run out or something, but all it is I'm really into phi and the golden ratio and stuff. As you make that tree bigger, now you just got every fruit known to mankind that you can kind of pick up and make better and what have you.
What do you mean you're into phi and the golden ratio?
So that is really big into sun capture. The math and you see it in how the crops will grow. So most people don't see it because they push crop density. All these breeders are saying how the way we're going to get the higher monocrop yield is we plant more plants.
So for somebody that's not in the farming world, seed companies come along and they say, you can plant this many corn crops, this many seeds in the ground, and this is the optimal distance that you should have in between each corn, and then how wide the rows should be.
Right.
And people don't realize, a slight adjustment to the density can mean the difference between 180 bushels or 200 bushels, right?
Yeah.
It has the potential to be but the companies have it in their interest to be like, we can fit more and more and more in here and they'll still grow. And they have the mantra of, you want to put them equally spaced so they don't compete with one another. So for somebody that wasn't involved in farming, that's kind of the background you would need to have.
Yeah. And everything's getting better genetics. And so what? I mean, a market sheep is now 150 pounds instead of 115 years ago. Cows produce more milk. We're getting more yield or whatever. So we think we're really pushing the ball forward. But what I've kind of looked at when we go back to that 3 triangle deal, wheat now, we are getting so crazy of weather. We're getting these months where we get 10 or 12 inches of rain. And that's what's hurting our crop more than all the stuff you want to talk about on these meetings. It doesn't matter if it's going to drown, right? So when I started planting these wheat rows further and further apart, what I noticed was it would grow in this half a circle or in the shape of phi. And phi isn't a half pi, or 3.17, 1.57, is 1.618. So what happens is your southern sun shapes and contorts that plant so it'll be higher on the north side and lower on and it makes it an actual perfect phi circle.
In each row.
Yeah, in a row, if you give it the space. So
kidding.
So you go back to this forced multiplication. If I can spur on that crop to think that it's by itself, it'll multiply, and then all the leaves can collect solar energy, and it just produces so much more with the same exact seed. So going back 3 years ago in my garden, I took a corn plant that was emerged, and I put it in a spot by itself. And my 5-year-old was 2 at the time, and he was potty training. And I said, Liam, why don't you just have target practice on that guy? So I had plenty of energy in that. But
a lot of nitrogen in there, yeah.
But it instantaneously went from 1 plant to 3 stalks, and then I ended up getting 31 ears from that 1 seed. Now, 12 of them had viable, nice kernels. About 10 of them had spotties, but there was 31 silks from that 1 plant. So
did it look like a teosinte plant? Like that sounds like what you're describing. So it's spread out like that?
Yeah.
Like a bush.
Yeah, and that normal plant, 1197, gets maybe 9-10 feet tall. It was 5'5". It was Gary Coleman on roids.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so what did that teach you then?
That elasticity is amazing. It took 6 weeks from the first time I saw a silk to the last silk. So that plant is constantly evaluating its environment. So at that point, I'm like, if I spread it out, I can get more higher unit valuations. And now I can kind of change my agronomics around. And then everything's just a math formula. We talk about precipitation. So how do we take that head on? A would be make a phone call, get on Google and get a drainage guy out there and spend $1,000 on pattern tile. Now there's value in that. Or I can just put a lot of minions out there. So the weed in wide rows is consuming 1 acre inch for every 3 bushel.
You've already lost me, man. Let's slow this down. So I am not raising crops. So I'm with you on most of it, but so you've got a wheat field,
right?
And it rains a whole bunch,
right?
You have 2 options. You can either bring a guy in to lay pipe in tile,
right,
to drain it faster, or you could have minions out there. What did you mean by that?
Right, you can beat it to its spot. So you have to have some growth in the fall, and then it wakes up in February instead of mid-May, and it's consuming.
Okay.
And it's a cold season grass. So if it's 32, it's loving life.
Okay.
And it's growing. So when it rains, now instead of that water kind of,
either pooling on the top or
pooling
draining,
off and going to the low spot, it stays in its spot, it infiltrates, and then it's consumed. So it comes down to finite math. If 3 bushels equals 1 acre inch and I get 40 inches of rain, I want to consume 12 inches. I need to raise 36 bushel wheat. And then you take that liability and turn it into an asset. And you can have life consuming, and you can have death actually preserving moisture, because now it's this dead thatch that can control weeds. And when it rains, it stays wet and cool. Same thing with finite math. If my surface is 110 degrees, I'm burning enough moisture. If it's 82 with a mat, I'm holding moisture. So people bitch about the rain all the time. What are you doing about the rain? You know what I mean? And that's what it kind of comes down with all these stuff. We can talk all day about production.
Even that question is almost heterodox, right? It's like, hey, there's too much rain. What are you doing about the rain? Like that's, like, what do you mean? What am I doing about the rain?
The best thing that I love is I have all these people from around the world are kind of on these little tours, and they'll come by, and the Australians will come by, and you give them like 5 or 6 beers, and they just start bloody effing this and that. And the guy was talking about the rain, and he hadn't had a crop in 3 years, and you can see it's on fire now.
Yeah.
And he just had this meeting with an old timer, and the old timer just basically called him a bitch, if you will. I mean, he just was like, well, what are you doing about it? Quit bitching about the rain, do something about it. And that was kind of like his kind of,
man, and that's like that's the ultimate example of extreme ownership, right?
Yeah.
Where it's saying like, you don't like the way that the heavens are breaking open and pouring water down, then deal with it.
Right.
And you feel like you're establishing answers that are legitimately going to going to change?
I'm not saying that tile, like you still need the water to get out, but you can actually improve a crop yield by placing another species to be a big brother. Just imagine, did you have a brother or sister?
Oh yeah, I'm the middle of 7, man.
Oh, you're middle of 7. Well, if you were 14 and you would go, it was pretty nice having a 17-year-old brother, and that's kind of what you see, but it's this spectrum analysis. Okay, I don't want the wheat to be so thick that it hurts it, but I want it to be a big brother and be able to just say, check.
And so in these fields, when you were describing that wheat would grow in this, why does the entire field not grow that way?
Because my crop, I manage my footprint, if you will. So I've widened the rows. I figured out, I call it the leash of a dog, if you will. If I have a deadly dog here and it's got a 5-foot leash on it and it's this long, it's going to get so close, it's not going to, bite your head off.
Right.
So I figure out physiologically how a crop is built, and then I make my row spacing based on the solar angles that is going to block, if you will, and that's where I need to have my crops.
You mean like your soybeans in that case?
Right. So most people have all this equipment in the barn, and they're like, well, we're going to make this work on 20 inches. We're going to make it work. When really you need to have, not a pot to piss in and go out in your garden and figure out what's actually important and then build the machine. And that's really the biggest problem that I have. People have these ideas, they fester over what they should do, when really they need to just do it.
And you're kind of saying the sunk cost fallacy. So for people that don't know, when you're saying we're going to make this equipment work, it's because if you have a combine, you buy a header, and it's expensive. I don't know, what does a header cost? $100,000? Yeah, okay. And that's what allows you to go through the field and pick up either soy or corn. And but they're designed such that they can only grab the rows that are so wide apart. And you've got a little bit of wiggle room, but not a lot.
Yeah.
And so you're saying, hey, that's a sunk cost. Yes, that's the capital asset that you have. But if you don't look at another way of doing this, you're going to miss out on the fact that you could do this either more efficiently or, well, that's probably it.
Or just go to the junk pile, tile, and just make it work. You can, there's, going back to the rock by the door, hold it on, or break a stick off to do this. I mean, 4 years ago on Twitter, I came up with this cutter bar condom or polyprocolactive, and I just took the kid's plate off and just stuck it on a toy combine, and I drew my little crop schematics and I made it go. And I'm like, well, just block it. So a company in Canada developed flexi fingers, and we put it on any head that you can think of, and we can just move it. I mean,
then it's not grabbing up there, so you could actually knock out that row and then make the other rows on the outside. Yeah, we just
make the soybeans do the limbo. So they're 2 foot tall. I figured out just by pushing it and being like, is it dead yet? I mean, you can compress a 2 foot soybean down to about 5 inches, and it's fine. Actually likes it.
Dude, you're nuts, man. You are crazy. People must think that you do people poke you about this? Like,
oh yeah. Who cares? I mean,
have you? So I'm wondering now. Is your house constructed? I'm trying to think of the book. The Cheaper by the Dozen, where the dad builds all these contraptions and makes everything work as what do you call those? Where you click over a domino and it just keeps going to hit other dominoes.
I love that domino.
Is your house like that?
Not really. I mean, my wife, I should have more projects around the house. I like to just be outside. So
I see.
I've got about 7 different little mini businesses I do. Like, I love weather. So I want to take on snowstorms like Lieutenant Dan. So I have a little snow removal ice business, and I get to go out and watch every flake and get on my radar and stuff. And then I got a golf course, a little Tesla 9, if you will. It's like 3 greens and 9 holes. So I got there and play, and you just and then.
Oh, when you said I wish I brought my golf clubs, you weren't kidding. You actually do golf.
Oh yeah, I've been playing a lot lately.
Oh wow,
it's been nice.
Okay,
we can talk. I'd love to talk what I want to do with the golf industry.
Oh, I'm open to hearing it. The golf industry, well, not so much the golf industry, but I've gone down to speak to several turf management either companies or universities, and people in the United States have no idea that grass is actually the largest crop we grow in the United States by far. There's a lot more acres of planted grass than any other single crop. And so you show up at these turf symposiums and you think, oh, there's going to be 10 people here or 20 people. No, there's hundreds and hundreds of people that all they do all day, every day is study seed development and machine building, and it's cool. North Carolina State was where I went most recently. It was cool. So what do you want? I'm into this. I don't like golf that. I don't play golf.
And there's the problem. I shared something. People say golf's dead, right? And it is dead. There's all these courses going bankrupt, and the problem isn't that golf's dead. People don't have 6 hours.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
And another problem is if we just became friends and you golf and I don't and I kind of suck, it's like going to Vegas and playing blackjack they're going to give you shit if you don't play the right card.
Right.
And Top has basically made this.
It's turned golf into bowling.
Right.
You can just sit there and
drink a beer and beat a ball, right?
Yeah. I thought that was, when I was there, I was like, this is so clever because they took out the fact that I'm going to go golf for 4 hours and they made it into an hour-long thing.
Right. So there's space. There's tons of space between having 200 acres of turf with 12 employees and like $1 million operating budget and have snack bar. And then all these old people are like, this is our club. We tuck our shirts in and just all this stuff. And then if you're this new novice, you go out there and you top your ball and then the guys are like, nice shot. What if you could take that down to this synergistic kind of nickel and nine that I talk about? Like a few greens, you and your buddies have the whole damn place to do whatever you want, right? You can have a wedding there. You can do whatever you want. But the point is on all this is people are so infatuated by, I need a better word than decorum or best management practice. They just say, this is how it's done. But you can do things. You can just eliminate so much. Like you just want the golfing experience. You want to beat a white ball and drink some beer, right?
Right.
Right. And
I don't, but I know that there are people that do.
It's AstroTurf.
Right.
There's a space between. And I think you just build it. And once you have enough connections, you show people that it's awesome and they'll come and it'll become a cult classic. And then we can funnel all of our hog manure products onto the turf.
So you're married with 2 kids. I think there are a lot of husbands out there that would say, yeah, I got some ideas, but there's no way I'm going to talk my other half into letting me roll the dice on some of these ideas. Yeah. How have you made that work?
Just a lot of friends. Just instill ideas and they run with it. Give them some pep talks,
So a lot of what you're doing is inspiring other people to get things done. Exactly.
That's a big joy. It's not only people coming by, but my direct messages are like, I tried this, what should I do? And then, where I had this moment with my wife when I came back from, I went on this 8-day trip to 5 different cities and I went to the FBN thing and I couldn't get away from people. It's just
Farmers Business Network.
Farmers Business Network. And I told her, I was like, I had 30 dumpster fires where I'm sitting around and I'm getting into all my stuff and I never bought a beer. Everyone bought me beer. And I'm just like, you think that when I was 2 years old, I had an imaginary friend in my belly button. I've never told anybody this. I named him Poey. And I talked to Poey. And I always felt like before this really got going, when you get your phone out, it's an imaginary friend. And when you see how many people are absorbing the information, taking it into their context, and then trying things, and then sharing it, and then kind of changing their mindset is powerful.
I think you're hitting on something really important, which is there are a lot of people that have good ideas or ideas that are along the edge, but they've spent so much time around people that want them to be cautious, that they feel like they're completely alone. So when you open up the gate and say like, hey, I'm interested in hearing your crazy idea and I may just believe in you, that changes somebody's demeanor because there are just not that many options for them to get it in another environment. And I think even if you have a really great spouse, they can only take so many of your ideas. Whereas a lot of things, there's a book that I think it's The History of Scientific Revolution, and it says new knowledge does not come from the chaos. New knowledge comes from making mistakes. And so you have to come up with an idea that's a little bit chaotic, but you've got to put it into a system like what you're talking about and then figure out exactly what you're saying, what works and what doesn't work. But the tolerance that most people are taught that they should have for mistakes is pretty close to zero. Yeah. And it makes it so if you pop up and you're like, hey, I want to hear your crazy idea, people are down with that.
Yeah. And as we've had these kind of conglomerate corporations, if you will, there's this feeling of we have less control as farmers. We're not as independent. But that is the screen pass, if you will, that exploits it. You doing what they can't do by being free with an idea, even if it doesn't work. You know, as kind of I've gained some recognition. I've been in some interesting meetings, and you'll talk to a rather large corporation, and you'll start talking about an idea. It's starting to get traction or this, and you can tell there's really smart guys in the room, and you can see their eyes going in the back of their head and saying, "Oh shit! If we go to 60-inch rows, we sell less units." You know, and that's the threat of a lot of things. When we go back to that matrix, if you start replacing things with natural systems, it's really disruptive to an industry. You know, it could be a blockbuster, literally.
Yeah, and I think there's people are predisposed to loss aversion. So I think most of the time the person that's calculating those units, right? Like it's a lot easier to get somebody. It's really hard to get people to gamble, right? Like if it's their money, like sure, you can go to Las Vegas and you can see a lot of people doing that. But when you do experiments on, would you be willing to put in $1 in order that you might get $10? People most of the time are like, no, I don't want. It's actually kind of amazing how the lottery works at all, because people's loss aversion is so high. And when I was working in corporations, that's what I saw all the time. You would say, I have a new idea, and people, instead of figuring out how can we make this idea fit into the paradigm that we're at, they would much rather just cut it out and say, no, we're not. No, we tried that before. Or, oh, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
So, where are you headed? What do you think is the most exciting thing going on in agriculture now?
Oh man, I don't know where to start. There's something every week. I mean, just in the last month, we're talking about going to Africa.
Where?
Tanzania.
Okay. Unajua Kiswahili?
Yeah.
So why Tanzania?
They need help. There's a lot of places in the world that have just been kind of forgotten, and big ag's kind of coming in and saying this is the way, and their culture really isn't accepting that. So I think that's really the power of not
where
so
are you
much,
going there? Like, do you know where in Tanzania?
I don't want to share too much.
Okay.
And I mean, it's new. But from I think we all get closer to 40 and we start thinking about, your legacy and stuff. And, I think you get kind of turned off by the rat race that is here somewhat. I mean, I still want to develop a bunch of things here, but, I'm really wanting to get into kind of the educational standpoint. What's a great thing about that part of the world is, let's say you're a young student that wants to get into agriculture. I don't want to throw any universities under the bus, but most of the buildings have, are sponsored by some big corporation, and they're just trying to make cogs in the wheel, if you will. Can there be a place that you could go and an acre of ground is basically like me ripping out one notebook and saying, Vance, you draw on this and you make some art and do whatever you want. And that's pretty cool to have a climate that'll grow things and nobody's screwed the canvas up yet.
It's interesting. Africa clearly is getting the most sun, right? There's like bountiful, huge volumes of sun, basically 365 days a year. And as long as you have water, it should work. Mm-hmm. But I lived there for a while, and I was struck by the fact that infrastructure is a real thing, mm-hmm. and that that it's not just the putting in of, I saw many projects where there used to be a well here, but it was run with a generator that nobody could get the replacement parts to. So now it just sits there. I wonder as people are moving into Africa, how they'll overcome that, because the Chinese have a strategy, and the strategy is we are going to dump all of our inflationary money into Africa and bring people over here to fix these things and then build them up and build relationships. That's not going to work in a U.S. context. And I don't know how much money China has to actually do that over the long term. Mm-hmm. So how do you think Africa will level up in terms of infrastructure? Well,
I mean, it all begins, it's just like the urban crawl or whatever. I mean, you're going to have to start around a port, right?
Yeah.
And you don't have to drag it across the whole country. And then that's where the reduction comes in point. If you can develop no-till organic, you don't need all this things that you think you need, right? So there's perennials that grow that animals can just be grazed on. So, I think I think the future of ag is going to be even more options, but it's going to be pretty simple. I think you can get pretty simple there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you brought up organic.
More about knowledge, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think you're completely right about the sharing ideas and mathematics. Like there's a guy, I'll have him on the podcast here in the next, couple of months that when I lived in Kenya, you're put in with a family. I was in the Peace Corps. Mm-hmm. And in that family, you learn, how do I take a bucket bath? How do I live without electricity? So you don't really know. So you live with the family. And there was a guy that was a cousin to my family. He was around all the time, named Sam. And Sam's IQ was off the charts. I mean, it's unbelievable how smart that guy was. He just didn't have access to tools. So he was taking computer coding classes with a cardboard box. It was like he would go there and they would talk about it and then they would pretend to type on it. And he told me this one time, I thought he was kidding. And then we went and I saw it and it was literally that's what they were paying for these classes. But he now lives in the US. He got a nursing license and he's in Oklahoma actually with our buddy Jared McDaniel near there. And I think that you're right that there are there are more chances for people to take that sheet of paper out of the notebook and experiment here in a way that it just doesn't exist there. And it doesn't exist in part because of what I was saying about infrastructure, but another big part of it is they don't have a margin for error, right? Like you mess up that one page and now people aren't eating.
I think we might have got to mix it around. I'm saying we could bring younger people there to experiment.
In the U.S. From the U.S.
From the U.S. to Africa. From Europe, from Australia, make it like a global hub. While South America is basically deforesting to make more soybeans, you're over here because ground is so cheap. Maybe we replace deforestation and we're making paper out of hemp. And maybe we're building homes with hemp. Maybe we're...
Wow.
Dude,
that's way out there.
Right. But it's the economics work much better when you're given land to basically be a teacher, right? Then you're coming with the idea of move over, get the bulldozer out, bring in GMOs here, sling the urea. Let's start pumping out soybeans,
Wow. I am damn near speechless that's your idea. That's, I don't have a feeling on it one way or another. It's just very different. I've never heard anybody say that.
One thing that you get the feel of is you start pushing things. I mean, Canada can do all this climate stuff or whatever. And I'm not saying that's the number one thing, but whatever you don't do here, they're going to do in another part of the world. Right. So I think you've got to kind of smother the fire, somewhat. And I don't know.
So changing the subject, but you brought up the word organic, and I am keenly interested in what a guy like you thinks of organic farming, which includes all the way from planting and raising the crop using the organic guidelines, but then also the sales and how it gets to people and why they choose it. What are your thoughts on organic?
I don't know. It's tough. You've got the transition period around here. I've never grown it myself. The 3 years.
Between when you've used products that are considered conventional or traditional, you have 3 years of I can't use it and I can't declare it as organic, so I don't get that premium.
Right.
But once that 3 years is done, now you've sunk 3 years into getting lower crop yields, but not getting the value for organic, and now you're in the system. Mm-hmm. So it is a little bit of like a metanoia. You've got to go die from the old system to get into the new one.
But I don't think it's going to be really relevant. I mean, it will be somewhat, but not nearly the weight that it had 2 or 3 years ago. There's been some things to really devalue it.
Really? Tell me more about that.
I just think everything's going to be just more transparent. What's the thing on your ring, on your doorstep? I mean, why wouldn't you just have your food on a camera all the time and check it out? I mean, people are going to start buying their food before it's produced. And that's going to be this next level when you start infusing a blockchain, when you start the things we can do with the char to kind of be this litmus test of what's actually happening with your water quality and things like that.
I one time made a proposal with my buddy Rob Long, basically saying, this is before Amazon bought Whole Foods. We were like, imagine Amazon goes into the food system, and now imagine that once they do that, you can subscribe to basically a playlist of food. Taco Tuesdays, something, maybe it's Meatless Monday, whatever. And Amazon just starts shipping you guys the food that is within that genre. So it was before Blue Apron had become what it was and then how it died. But then you start thinking like Amazon, the further out that you decide, I'm going to do a 6-month subscription for this playlist of food. Now they can start going out into the futures market and buying chicken 6 months ahead of time because they know it's going to your house and they know it's going to that guy's house. They could really steal the show when it comes to how products get sold before they're even produced, to your point.
Yeah.
So I think that's almost inevitable. I think there'll be a place for grocery stores, but in 10 years, we're going to have to find something to do with a whole lot of parking lots in the United States. See,
I'm always intrigued by different industries that really kind of build an app and kind of bring people to the community to participate in the workforce. You've probably ran into a city where they have bird scooters. I was in Nashville, Tennessee.
Bird scooters?
Yeah, these just little scooters. So you just put your
they
card
call them
in
Lime
there.
Bike here.
Yeah, we had a Indianapolis Colts game there for New Year's.
Okay.
I spent New Year's somehow with Kid Rock at this little thing.
As you do.
Yeah. But there was about 1,000 of these scooters on the bridge. So the next morning we get up and eat breakfast, and they're all like perfectly charged up in a line everywhere. And in the city, it was just chaos. So all these people just on the workforce picked them up, take them back to their apartment, plug them in, put them back to the spot, and they get so much for that. It's just like how Uber works. So when you start figuring out something from a level of first in your garden, get better in a 3-year, then you start plugging in the community. With chickens, why are they in barns? Honestly, I mean, I know that
they're in barns because there are hawks that'll come and sweep them away,
there
and
is
disease
But there's natural ways to, grow them a little bit different. I'm not saying that's against, but I think there's going to be ways to, as research and knowledge rolls forward on the kind of regenerative, organic cover crops and everything, you're going to have maybe 10 people from the community working your field, and they're going to have another entity that's building them wealth. They're doing a specific job for that crop. They're distributing the manure, they're managing the weeds and the bugs, and then you're growing corn. And I think that's what excites me on sharing knowledge and putting seeds in people's mind and is what's the next level that's going to be more.
You seem to have a lot of faith in other people. Is that true?
Yeah.
Because I think that the vision that you're putting forward of the sharing economy and people wanting to go out into fields has something to do with the level of energy, if not discipline, that people want to put into these types of things.
Yeah.
How accurate do you, as I hear you say it, I think Jason sounds naive because he sounds like he believes too much in people, but I could be the asshole here. Like I could be wrong.
The problem is everyone thinks that it's got to be the answer. It just has to be your answer. You just create it, right? And that's the big hiccup. It's like, well, that won't work on a scale. Who cares? You just do it and prove it. And then somebody, if I die tomorrow, somebody will pick up something if it's interesting. And the more you do that. But honestly, the way that I'm shaped, I lost my father at 53 to pancreatic cancer. That's why I came to the farm. And then my next dad up, if you will. So I was farming with my farm, and then my mom's brother farmed, and he was farming 7,000 acres.
Wow.
A go-getter. And kind of my mom and dad were kind of the prosperous farmers on this side of the county. Well, he built that. He's just a workaholic, but he got cancer when he was 53 and passed. So I went seeing two way too young deaths in their prime. I was playing basketball with my dad at that time. We'd check each other.
Wow.
Both of them. Extremely physical.
How old were you?
I was 29 and then 35, 36.
Jeez.
Yeah. So I drive now, I have all the land. I remember farming with him, and then you drive east and you just go, we call it Louis land, and no one's there. And you just lose that gland that all these farmers have, I'm going to farm the county gland, where you just work like 120-hour weeks. It does not matter because you're building. When people just leave, like in that, when cancer hits them and you just watch that, your legacy, it changes. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, once you know you're finite, once you really feel that, then the whole world changes focus.
Yeah. So I I totally am naive, and I have a lot of ideas that won't work. And I think I've became more not worried about if something doesn't work out, because I just need to be engaged, and I have a lot of faith in people.
The death thing is an interesting one. So I think my view on death has changed rather dramatically just in the last few months. I remember one of my first podcast guests, we talked about, my buddy Nick Cizik one time asked me if when I meditate, if I ever meditate on death. And I was like, no, hell no. Why would I go anywhere near that? And just last week, my buddy gave me a little coin, and it says memento mori, which is remember you will die. And I love it now, because in that span of time, from one of the first podcasts to today, I think the knowledge that you are going to die clarifies some shit. Like, it says hey, I don't actually, if I waste a day, that's actually a real thing. That's gone. I don't get it back.
Right. That's what it all boils down to. It's time. That's all you got.
Do you, when you watched your dad die at that age and then your uncle, do you have a sense that 50s is when you're going to go, or do you?
Yeah. I mean,
that happened
earlier.
to a good friend of mine. Then he got it in his head and he could never shake it.
Yeah.
And so
I'm very weird. I just
Are you spiritual?
I love the cat, love the dog, love the boys, love the wife. I kind of go in this vicious circle, and then I get in my ADHD thing, and I'm just.
I mean, so the things that you say, and when I said that you sound naive, I want you to take that as a real compliment, because I spent the last 5 years of my life in corporate America, and their people are not naive, and their people are, they've seen everything, and they're tired, and they look around for other people to inspire them. And when I think of somebody being naive, sure, it could be like Jason could get taken advantage of, but you're a freaking huge guy. I think you're going to be just fine. I mean it in the sense of pure of heart, white snow. It's good. It's good to be around. It's refreshing. When I hear you say these things about love and about your family, and are you a spiritual guy? Is this something that you think about regularly?
I love people. I don't like politics or organized religion much. I just don't really like rules, and
yeah, that's becoming clear.
Yeah. I hate judgment. I said hate. I don't like to say hate, but yeah, I don't know how to go beyond that. But I just feel like from my experience, I mean, my grandma was the first one right before dad. And you just remember your grandma, you're during the day, and you ever once you get over the first month or two, and then it's kind of hard, but then when you start remembering people, something they did or something they said or something, then I think that's what's concrete. And then so my interaction with my kids and my wife or anyone I meet is just do the best you can to just be remembered, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I've been very, very fortunate, although now I kind of feel like it's a debt I owe the universe, in that very few people in my life that I've been close to have died. I mean, I have a mentor that's 99 years old, and he just keeps going, and I've been so lucky. But I was at church with my parents for Christmas, and I went back home, and I was looking around, and I was thinking about this man that was my godfather when I was growing up, and I was like, oh, I can't wait to see Greg. And then it hit me, Greg's not here, and he's never coming back. And even as a 30-something-year-old guy, that concept of what legacy did he leave? He left a guy that wanted to see him at Christmas, but then what legacy do I want to leave? It's a powerful thing to think about. How much interaction have you had with the seed companies, right? So you work for a seed company, and then you clearly buy seeds from companies.
Right. So I do sell Pioneer seeds. I have, I've been in the seed business for 5 or 6 years. I don't pursue it too much. I'm just kind of the local farmer, agronomist guy, have a field day and that kind of stuff. And
the consolidation of the seed companies, Bayer buying Monsanto, Syngenta being purchased by the Chinese, Dow and DuPont coming together. What are your thoughts on that? You don't seem to be a guy that loves consolidation.
I don't know. I think it's I'm just real hesitant to share the data. There's something about me when, when you go back to the commodities things and it's subsidized, and now I don't have control over my market, and now I need to follow by the rules to get this operating loan, and now they have all my data. At a certain point, if they're telling you exactly what to do, you're just a cashier. I mean, I think that's part of the whole death thing. Like, if I die tomorrow, there's going to be some dude come over and plant corn and beans. Like, and that's what it all comes down to with kind of the consolidation of the right decisions and the right hybrid on the right acre and the right. It's like, hello, I'm here. I'm a farmer. I can do something else. And that's not really answering your question.
No, but I think that opens up an interesting. What do you think? So there's the seed companies want to try and level out the waves that come with, hey, we're having a really great sales year. Hey, we're not having such a great sales year. And one of the ways that they're doing this, at least I think Bayer is rolling out this pricing where you share in the profits. So I don't understand it all that well, but essentially it's you plant a crop, and as long as you follow within these parameters of, applying this much nitrogen or making sure that it has the right crop protection, then we split the earnings. We take a third off the top and you get the other 2/3, but you get a reduced seed price. Is that accurate in the way that I'm describing it?
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
Numbers. I mean, it's kind of blue ocean, if you will. I'd like to use Airbnb as an example. If the Super Bowl comes to St. Louis, now the Days Inn goes from $59 to $589. So they're just basically capitalizing on good weather in different regions, and they're kind of using this kind of we share the risk as just lube.
It's just lube?
Yeah.
Oh, to getting fucked.
Yeah, not so much, but just make it. I mean, the problem is, I'm like, I know people that will like that idea. Well,
farm
Grandpa wants to
managers
farm 50-50, and you are sharing risk. But
a huge percentage of our acres in the United States are farmed by farm managers. And if a farm manager can go to an absentee landlord, so a farm manager is a person that says, you put your land under my control, and I will either pay you rent for it, or I will do some sort of, I'll follow these rules that you have. But the farm manager loves it because it really slows down the amount of risk, the up and down. They're not trying to ride the up and down. They're just trying to get a consistent payment in.
Right. A farm manager, I know a lot of them. They're great people, but it's like, one of my first jobs out of college, I sold windows. If I got $1,100 a window, my commish was huge. If I got $900, I got $0. So marketing and sales organizations use the salesperson as the interface. And if you can't lock in that tremendous profit margin, guess what? You're going to eat beans next month.
Were you a good salesman?
They're still going to push for market share. They're going to keep theirs, right? So your farm manager says, if you don't like $350 an acre, Tough Titty said to Kitty, I'll go buy and get it from somebody else because he's willing to take that lack of risk. And there just seems to be, we just get further and further and further away from that, grandpa true risk, if you will.
Do you think there will be a person that identifies as a farmer in this same way over the next 10, 15, 20 years?
What do you mean by that?
Well,
question?
I mean, you were saying like, hey, I'm a farmer. I'm here. I'm an individual. But in a lot of ways, what you're describing is a craftsman, right? A person that takes a look at it and does it by hand, whereas you could probably hedge a lot of risk, cut out a lot of craftsmen that aren't good if you just standardized and industrialized the whole thing. I don't necessarily want that, but it seems like that seems inevitable, right? The march from 40% of people living and working on farms in the 1900s all the way down to 1.8%
yeah, but it's not 1.8 really. I mean,
it's probably
it is, but the true like 2,000 acre farmer that I'm not saying if you don't farm 2,000, whatever it is, it's less than 1% for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, that derive their entire income from farming. Yeah,
yeah.
So, do you think that will continue?
I hope not. I mean, like I said, it doesn't have to be the trend, but you can do whatever you want and share it, and you can do it in your own little world.
Were you a good salesman?
No, not really. I actually found a big loophole You want me to share it a little bit?
Oh yeah. I'd love to hear this.
So I was in insurance sales. I didn't really like that too much. So I went to a home improvement sales, and I did that for about a year. And so they would give you a couple leads, 2 or 3 or 4 at the beginning of the day, and you would drive all over the state, and they would just derive these leads from like farm, like county fairs and stuff. So you got some true great ones like demolition derby people, and they're like, there's no way. So anyway, I went on this lead, and I was down literally, like I had like $20,000 in college from selling stuff, and I kind of burnt through it my senior year, road trips and whatever. And I was just literally about down to nothing. And I went to a lead, and nobody was there. And there was these 2 roosters that came up and chased me to my car, and I barely made it to my car. And I'm just shut the door. I'm like, what the hell am I doing? I'm broke and whatever. So, basically you have like 2 or 3 sales managers, and then they have kind of their minions go out and run all these calls. And I said, screw it. I'm just going to go start calling on their customers. So I went that night and printed off all the customers. They had 50,000 customers.
Wait, whose customers?
Just the companies. The top guys would get the best leads, just kind of the underhand throw, just, sign them up and make your $150K. So I just went to these small towns, and I just started knocking on doors, and I just killed it for about 3 weeks, and they would pay me more commission. And then I quit because they were starting to get pissed off.
Because you were taking the easy, good ones?
Yeah, but it wasn't a lead. It's not like they would ever service that account. I just went in there and said, I'm quality control. I'd like to see your windows we installed. You have a nice conversation with them. But the whole point, it's just like with the relay cropping, it's just like everything I talk about. We spend so much time spinning our wheels. Like I could farm 10,000 acres and have a guaranteed make $12 an acre, right? What's the derivative, right? What's the derivative of that sales is being in front of a good prospect, a past customer, racking the shotgun, right? So if you can spend 100% of your time doing something valuable, then you increase what you do in that time exponentially. And that just set it all off. So the previous year and a half, I learned how to get people on paper and all that stuff. So I made up my own forums and started a landscape business.
And so so when you left your home improvement, then you went into your landscaping.
Mm-hmm. And since that day, I've never really thought about, I'm not well off or nothing, but I've never worried about money really. It just, you can just do things at small scales and stay in kind of a low overhead cocoon, and then just figure out, better valuations of your time.
So you did landscaping.
Mm-hmm.
Landscaping is tough because it's the natural world doesn't really want to have things created on top of it. And you've got to make flat surfaces and make it look pretty. Why were you drawn towards landscaping?
I just wanted to get dirty. I mean, I was in insurance, and then I had to wear suit and tie for that deal. And I just wanted, take my shirt off, and I always felt like I had talent with working with the land and so on. And at that time I was 23, I played a lot of basketball. So I go to the University of Ball State, and I could just literally just be like, you over there. And then I get like the best athletes to run the weed eater. And those specimens could, if it's 95 degrees, they could work 13 hours. So when you go into an industry and you've got talent to put the things together, and then you have the actual horsepower and vigor, if you will, you can make it happen.
So you were getting players and stuff to come work on your landscaping crew?
Yeah, just really good athletes.
Dude,
right?
I think this is your talent. I think this is the thing that I'm discovering it. It's by believing in people and directing them to build something
I also love to talk. So, when you're running a landscape business, it's not corporate, and I would have this like baseball talk with them, like, I'm going to give you 2 hours, right? If you suck, you're gone. Like if you bat 222, I'm going to pay you $8 an hour. If you really hustle, 11. If you kick ass and I love you, 14. So I had these people.
Nobody does that. That's awesome.
Right.
That is fantastic.
I mean, I was constantly talking to people, and we'd drink 2 or 3 beers afterwards or whatever. And people would be like, go. But there was this,
you have a selection pressure there that makes it so you can select for people that are going to work.
I thought it was a good kind of life lesson for them. They were in school, and they couldn't go to, wherever they could work somewhere else if the market was at $7 or $8. So
Right.
if they could bust ass and make $15 an hour, you give them a shovel hard.
This leads right into one of my gripes with corporate America is that in order to hedge getting sued for discrimination, they took out most of the tests that you would give at a corporation. So the way that they tell whether or not you're qualified for this job is, do you have a degree? Well, the only way to get the degree is to go into debt to do that, because they're not going to have you come in. You have to have that college degree. Otherwise, the HR system says we can only pay them $32,000 a year. Well, if you are capable and competent and smart, you want to make $40, $50, $60, $80, $100,000 a year. And so they are forcing people to go get college degrees because they don't want to take on the risk of doing what you did, which is bringing somebody in, evaluating them, and kicking out certain ones because they don't want to get sued.
We're just making koala bears that we just put into the lion's den, like nonstop, right? Like if we need.
That's a hell of a metaphor.
It is. It's like, don't get a job, then your grades will suffer. Like we're valuing the wrong thing, and I think goes back to like whether it's chickens here or that. I want to start a community garden. I want to do all these things where I connect with young kids and make them start a small business, and it doesn't matter. I saw something on YouTube like 2 years ago, got this ball rolling. If I'm doing something completely mindless, I'm constantly listening to content on YouTube. This guy like talks
Do you pay
about
for
all these
YouTube?
languages. No.
Dude, it is worth the $10 a month.
Okay.
No questions asked, because you now can click the lock button on your phone and it still plays it, but only plays the audio, not the video. And so like
I get so mad at that.
Right. So if you pay the $10, you can do that. And then also think about your time, right? 30 seconds per new video per every 10 minutes.
You don't see that?
None of it.
Oh, yeah.
It's all gone. Okay. So that 10 minutes bought me hours and hours and hours every week, because I listen to a lot of YouTube, because there's a lot of content that is on YouTube that's not on a podcast. But because I can click that lock button, now it's just become a podcast.
It's helped me like do things on the honeydew list now. I'm like, I can just listen to YouTube and do this thing I don't really want to do. So it's
I think the podcast revolution, like what we're doing right here, is bigger than Gutenberg's printing press by orders of magnitude, because Gutenberg's printing press required that you still had to know how to read, and a physical object had to arrive in front of you for you to be able to open it up and shift through it. So you've already taken out, if you figure the Bell distribution of the number of people that can read something, it's not everybody, right? Like, so you've already taken out all the people that either can't read or don't like to read or don't have the time to read. And by having it be in a podcast, anybody can listen. You can get through much more coarse material if you have the intonation and the volume and the enthusiasm, and you've made it so I can now double my output. I can be weed eating and listening to a podcast. This is way, way bigger. The intellectual enlightenment that is coming from this is unparalleled. There's never been an invention like this before.
Yeah. Yeah, and just think how much better when you communicate or get up on the stage and talk, and just all the content that you came in.
100%.
You think about something, and it's.
Think about all the people that you get to meet this way.
Right.
Like there's a guy, the way that I learned how to eat was this guy named Radu Antonio, who was just this like Hungarian guy making weightlifting videos. And because of the way that he made them, it was like we were friends. And then on top of that, you could stack on like, oh, I trust what he's saying. I'm gonna follow his path for a little while because I've gotten to look into his eyes and I've gotten to hear his voice. And so you build a relationship, and then you get that volume of information. Like, it's truly amazing what's happened in our society. And I think a lot of people sit around and complain and talk about how bad and negative things are on social media. You can get rid of negative stuff on social media in an instant.
Let them dig their own grave.
Yeah.
Who cares?
People
are going to see people that are trolling me or whatever, and you think they're.
Do people troll you?
I have 3 or 4 troll accounts.
You're like the nicest guy in the world. Like,
yeah,
I think people would have to go pretty far out of their way to
honestly, people don't experiment enough to know that like elasticity is a thing, and they think that like it makes no sense. But I've all my videos, I'm like literally right there. You know, I'm showing you what's happening.
Between your videos and Jared McDaniel telling me that we should talk, I mean, your videos are awesome. I mean, more people that are experimenting should do that, because what you've done is created a gravity well of people like me that are like, I don't necessarily need to know this, but it feels good to see somebody experimenting, and particularly this fall, like as you were getting excited about how many soybean like pods were on the plants. Yeah. I mean, I think I felt just as much joy and excitement out of that as I would watching my close best friend doing it, because I got to watch that progress.
And you talked about the feelers or whatever, you know, it costs nothing. You know, it costs nothing to make a video, put it out there and get people's feedback. And that's when you look at this fractal experimentation, I think that's what I really want to encourage with young people starting a business is you don't need the capital. You don't need anything. You just need an idea and you need to share it. And you can share 10 ideas in a day.
Did you have a business as a kid?
Yeah, I had 4-H animals, but I sold sweet corn. I started selling sweet corn when I was about 9. And by the time I was 16, I had about 6 stands. And I would,
whoa!
Yeah. So I would take it was got corn. You remember when milk?
Yeah.
So I had all these got corn signs, and the state police would always get on me because I would have these, whatever the biggest piece of plywood was, I had like 10 or 12 of them, and I would have them everywhere, like sweet corn 2 miles ahead.
Oh, just like the South Dakota Wall or whatever.
Yeah. So I really enjoyed that. But that's what I say. Like I understood demand at that point. I knew when people started getting more sweet corn because you could feel it. So I would be in a mad rush with my dad. I'm like, we got to plant corn. He's like, it's snowing. But if I could beat the market, I could sell corn for $4 or $5 a dozen. And you were selling it for like $1.25 3 weeks later. So that was kind of my summer deal I look forward to, but it was interesting.
I ran a lawn mowing company, which was a good one. Once I mowed enough to be able to buy my own riding lawnmower, that's when I was off to the races, because then I figured out that it's really easy to pay a kid to ride around on a riding mower.
Right.
And as long as you don't care that you're the one pushing, that guy's going to mow and he thinks he's got the greatest job in the world. And I'm just making boatloads of money off of the fact
you're talking to the front, getting more jobs, and then you're getting the crust good.
Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah.
And that was one of those educations that if I didn't have as a kid, it's a lot more expensive to learn those lessons as an adult.
That's a great lesson right there, by the way. Let them do the easy job. You do the actual things that they'll see and make all the connection point. And that's what I did when I was landscaping. And I think a lot of people want to go towards the high horse job, but
my brother was a good experience. He was a good teacher for me. My dad helped him print off cards and mail them out. So I had seen how that business ran, but I had a customer.
Talk about another tangent while we're on it.
So I had a customer that actually was like, hey, did you know that if you get an edger and you edge somebody's sidewalk, the value of what you're doing here goes up by more than 25%. I'm like, what? Are you serious? He's like, yeah, just get an edger and just do it once. And then no one will be able to compete with you that isn't doing that. And I was like, okay. And I tried it and he was exactly right. Went out and bought an edger and I started making a lot of money.
Yeah. Color contrast and cleanliness, that was my thing. And it'd be edge, dyed, whatever, like the system of look. But I got a good feeling for packaging, and this is what kind of has a big deal with the relay intercropping thing. So you go look at like a condominium place or something that had like 53 places, and people wanted that account. So let's say it was at $500. Well, each one of them $53 houses is worth, say, $40 or $50. So if you would
for landscaping or for mowing, what are you talking about?
I'm just putting numbers out there as far as a packaging deal. So
packaging I'm confused.
Just like an open bid to, let's say, take care of a property.
Oh, okay.
They had 50 units, might go for 500, but each one of them by themselves is maybe $40.
Right.
So you discounted the job by 75% to get the package, and no one has the get up and go to knock on the doors to make the connections to make your own packaging. And that's all relay cropping is figuring out how to get more per each unit, but everyone has to think total yield. It's the same exact thing. It's the same thing as the sales thing.
I think you can do more here on this unit packaging because I sense your enthusiasm, but I'm I don't understand it. If I tried to walk out of here and explain it, I'd be like, I don't know, you get more. It was good. So start from the beginning. When you're saying this is currently how people think about per unit pricing in a farm. Tell me about that.
So let's just do the wheat and soybean thing.
Okay.
Most people are just a one summer annual. So that space between October and really May is goose egg. And more importantly than that, the rain's washing soil down the road and whatever. So we're just basically putting wheat there for water drawdown, for biological stimulant, and for weed control in that space.
Okay.
So we're putting biochar.
Oh, because if there's weeds there, and if there's wheat there, there's not Palmer amaranth or
Right.
or whatever these other weeds are that are out there. There's no thistle. It's
Exactly.
wheat.
Yeah, you're saying chemical company, we're not going to broadcast spray this whole field because the weed is in this space.
Okay.
So I'm developing things to only do actual inches of the field. So Big Ag is looking at a field view of prescriptions. I'm making kind of agronomic algorithms of time and space and species, if that makes much sense. So Palmer amaranth won't come until my soil hits a certain temperature, let's say 81 degrees. So that trigger point might not be till June 11th. So it's not relevant yet, but this other weed species is. But you can manage a species to change the solar angles, and you can do all these things if you think offensively instead of this problem's going to happen, but this is the product that I use. That's the whole
that
space.
is cool. That landed with me, and in particular, your explanation of the weeds. I also didn't realize, but you're totally right, that a soil has to be a certain temperature for seeds to get going, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. Like crabgrass. You wouldn't see it till July 12th, right? It doesn't grow to a point till then. So that when I ran the landscape business, say you had 200 acres, if you grew the grass 5.5 inches tall instead of 3 and fertilized it, you would get 0 weeds in the turf. Now, if you edged it, you might get these little tiny crabgrasses right on the edge, right? So why would you spray all the acres? Just put a little backpack sprayer and just spray the edge. Weed eating, right? You weed eat every time. They make a spray where the grass doesn't grow. Mix it with some 2,4-D. Now we don't have to weed eat. But I don't do that across the whole lawn or I wouldn't get paid to mow it. I might as well just do it right where we would weed eat. So everything has specific, management that. But Big Ag is thinking this is what we're going to do with this script, but we need to think more, how can we actually use natural things to replace what you think I need here? So it's not specifically organic. It's hedging risk and it's replacing costs. Elimination. And that's the significance. So
I think the thing that you're discounting is the value of IQ. I think and probably the value of attention, because like yours, it seems like can be divided quickly. You can context switch quickly, and you're able to hold a lot of rote information in your mind to apply it.
I have never written anything down.
Yeah, that's interesting. Why not?
If it's not worth remembering, it's not like everything.
That can't possibly be true. Look, these ideas were written down and then shared many times over and over. What's that?
I'll write stuff down. I mean, that's a hyperbole, but I'm just saying, like, if I go to a class, I'm the guy that's just doing this, and I've always been that guy.
Because if it doesn't stick, and
it keeps you present.
That's true,
right?
I've never gone back and looked at notes.
Exactly. Exactly. Once you figure that out, then you're like, what's the point?
Yeah. I still take notes though.
I think people, when we talk about reduction, they can't get over this. Like, if I don't do this, it's going to be a disaster. That's a total fear all the time. So it takes experimentation to know what's not relevant.
But don't you think
there's only so much?
I mean, some of that fear. One of the things that I've observed in farming, and I'm actually next week I'll have a guy on, Brian Scott, which would be really, it's interesting. He works with his dad really closely. It'd be interesting to talk with him. I think a lot of the traditions that happen in agriculture, when people say they're afraid to try new things, is because you're not getting over what your old boss told you should do. You're getting over what your father and your grandfather told you should do, and they kept the farm in the family.
Yeah.
And so there's something real to that is a fear to overcome. Was your dad open with you to try these new things?
Never really tested. I mean, we weren't in the same space. I would just help him out, load pigs and that stuff. I never questioned what he did. He basically was pulling the rope, and then he was gone, and I had to pick that rope up.
Oh, that's right, because you didn't come back to the farm until after he had died.
Yeah.
That's right. And then your uncle, was he supportive?
Yeah. I mean, Dad was just, he wasn't, if you messed up, he was going to chew your ass. He was, that was just him,
Are you that way to your kids?
No.
Do you think you will be when
they're not old enough?
Yeah,
yet,
you can't really chew their head.
My wife's really good. She's an elementary teacher, so she's got this whole mind calculus thing figured out or something. So I just kind of let her teach me on what to do. But
I was going to ask you a question about. Oh, I'll think of it in a little bit. What are you worried about? Oh, I know what I was going to ask you. So you've now mentioned a couple times that you ran pigs.
Mm-hmm. Still do.
I think African swine fever is a potential catastrophic apocalypse. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
I hope not, because I've got a lot of faith that it doesn't. But I think it will come here. But I think that we've developed enough, whether it's a vaccination or protocol to stop it in its place. I don't think it's going to take over.
But there is no vaccination for African swine fever.
They've got some theories, don't they?
So for anybody that doesn't know, African swine fever was in Africa, like the name suggests, for a really long time, and it hit African farmers because it was carried by ticks with wild boar populations, which would mix with the regular pigs, the domestic pigs. It had really stayed largely in Africa, but then it moved over to Asia and then spread slowly into China. And then China let that burn out of control. And once it gets into a pig population, you no longer need ticks to have it spread. What happens is the feed that it's in, whether mucus or any kind of animal, just the way that diseases spread. And it was in China, cut their population down, some say by a third, some say by a half, some say by more. That's the largest pork eating area in the world. Now that's where it was until 2 weeks ago, and it shows up in Europe. And now it's outside of the city of Brussels. This to me is like, people were not expecting that it would happen that fast. And I think that if you decimate 50% of the world's population of pigs, we have a real problem on our hands.
Yeah.
Because you can't replace that level of protein. And a lot of the people that are eating that are, particularly in China, but all over the world, they are not, it's not like eating cattle. It's not like a luxury thing. They're doing it because if they don't have access to that protein, they won't. Mm-hmm. So tell me about the protocols to make it so your pigs don't get African swine fever, because I think it's really dangerous. There's no vaccine.
Right.
There's no gene edited pig. Once it spreads.
I haven't done a particular lot of research.
There's a really great YouTube video about it. The African Veterinarian Society has a 3-hour documentary, and it is worth the price of admission. It's fascinating.
From my knowledge, if it does come, they literally just let the pigs just sit there, and they don't even come back to the site for like 7 or 8 months.
Oh, I didn't know that. I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, and they put some kind of like foam around it, and they just basically treat it like a fire that burnt down.
Really? Mm-hmm. It's can stay on clothes for something like 7 months. If people are, and that's the difference between U.S. system and I don't know how Europe's is set up, but we have really strong biocontrols when we think things are going on. But who knows, man?
Yeah.
You don't seem very keen to talk about African swine fever.
You really don't. It's maybe my biggest worry.
Really?
Yeah. You'd think I'd learn more about it, but
I think that this is like a dragon, right? Sometimes hard to look at the dragon. For me, it's a worry because I keep thinking, like, what is the way that you react if you think that a huge percentage of the protein in the world could be at risk? What would you do differently? And I don't have an answer for that. So I bring it up with people because I want to hear what do they think. But you see very, very little of it in the U.S. news. I have to get almost everything either from Europe or from NAMI, the North American Meat Institute's been really good about publishing stuff. But I'm probably hyper alert about it, but I think it's a big deal.
Yeah.
So what are you listening to on YouTube?
Oh man, everything. I like a lot of, you know what I'm really into, honestly? Animals, and my kid's into it. So I just he's very he wasn't a dinosaur and just now he's an animal, so he's got this big dictionary, and then we get on YouTube. But it's just so awesome to see how the animals have evolved and the predator-prey relationships and all that stuff, and then we play animals in the house, and so there's a lot of animals. There's a lot of in my meat and potatoes, a lot of Seth Godin and Gary V and some of those people. And,
have you ever heard of this guy, Wes Watson? I'm a little nervous to talk about this, but so Wes Watson is a convicted felon, and he was in prison for 10 years. Mm-hmm. And he does all of these episodes where he's in California and he's wearing like California kind of skater dude sunglasses, but he doesn't have a shirt on, and he is this huge muscular dude with tattoos all up and down his neck. But he is a stoic philosopher. He's basically like, this is how you harden your mind to be able to survive the worst place on earth. And this is what then I've learned since I've spent 15 months out of it. And he talks about like the raw, edgy stuff. I mean, there's all sorts of racism and stuff in prison. It's crazy. But I have never heard anybody that be as compelling as he is on having a disciplined life so you should, if you like Gary V, check that out. It'll blow your hair back. His name is Wes Watson. He goes by like GP, General Population or Penitentiary Life, something like that.
Okay. Little tangent on that. I don't really want to bring back the African swine flu, or fever.
Yeah.
But, things are going to happen if we live in a completely bleach, sterile environment. And I think that's just like coddling your kids. I mean, you think you get so good at one thing and sterilize and fix, but you just lose all the resiliency, and you just become more sensitive to a disaster.
Yeah, I mean, there's that whole theory about the reason that allergies have gone up is because we're in such a hyper clean society. And they say people that have a dog that goes outside, their kids have far less allergies because they're exposed to the dirt and grime and things like that.
And I don't want anyone to hear this and think I'm dissing anybody, but if you would interview a farmer from probably 1910, if you want to read good literature on just like the stuff that I talk about, you'd have to go far that back. When I talk about separation, we've got to have more of a sense of the true derivatives of what's driving ag more than how to drive a tractor or take a script or what hybrid you should plant. I think we're getting further removed from that.
I'm much more open to you saying this than I am to like the people at Stone Barns or the Michael Pollins, because when I've heard them say it, I think I put on a sheen that's not fair to them. That's like, oh, you're saying that because you want to disrupt the system because you want to be on top.
Right.
And when I hear you say it, I hear you saying like, hey, we're missing out on things, guys. Hey, don't forget this. Like, don't leave this behind. So I'm really glad that you're out talking about this stuff, because even if you're wrong, at least people, I'm not saying you are, but even if you were wrong about some of your different, at least somebody's going out there and trying and shaking things up. And you're at least making people go like, I don't know, should we do something different than 20-inch rows? I don't know.
Well, I think, so just a little tangent on kind of my thought process as of late. So, in the 50s or whenever Henry Ford came in, was that the
it would be before, yeah.
20s. Yeah. I mean, he just made a man's hands more valuable through all that stuff. And we kind of kept that in ag for a while. But then, in the 70s and 80s, we're trying to, as all this tech was coming in, we're like, okay, it wasn't just about horsepower, how many, plows I can turn over and how much I could cultivate. We had this like urgency plus kind of what's relevant or important. When I wake up, should I plant today or plow or whatever? But what I really strive to get is this significance factor, right? Like, what can I do right now to like that next year I won't have to do that. You know what I mean? That's what I think's is significant. It might not scale across the whole world, but I think we're stuck in two-dimensional thinking, and we need to be thinking 3 or 4.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. I think you are discounting the fact that the way that you think is not common. And that's probably one of your hurdles, but I think that social media helps you overcome that hurdle.
It's an opportunity, really. Again, it doesn't have to scale. You just have to do it. And I put a tweet out a couple weeks ago. It's like, quit worrying about what anyone or everyone thinks. Shoot your gun as loud as you can. And the people that are still haven't scattered away, that's the someone you're looking for.
Amen. I love that. I love that. That's right. That's right. So
you can do that now. You don't have to be in, corporate polished America.
What's your philosophy on Twitter? How do you think about it? How do you think what you post and what you look at and who you follow?
I've got I don't really look at it that much. I just post things. I go to other avenues for that, which is bad. I mean, I interact a little bit, just mostly DMs, just conversations back there. But I just use Twitter to just that's just my microphone,
Are your DMs open? So if somebody wants to, What is your Twitter handle?
Jason Mauck 1. That's Mauck 1.
Okay, man, this is great. I'm so glad that you came into town. Where you say you speak some, if people wanted to go out and see you at different things.
Yeah, Wednesday morning, National No-Till Conference. I speak at 9:30.
That will have been last week. So a week ago you spoke at that.
Yeah.
But, and any other things on the horizon? Any other places you're going to speak?
Yeah, several. There's No-Till on the Plains. I'm doing some young farmers deal in Iowa, down to Florida, Washington, D.C., speaking in front of the USDA coming up.
What are you going to tell them?
Ohio. Just kind of share I'd really like to get into kind of the subsidized production deal and our distribution of manure and relay cropping. And, it's hard. I only got a half hour instead of an hour, so that'll be kind of tough.
Well, you are very fast talking. This has been a wild, wild ride. So thank you so much for stopping by and hanging out, man.
Yeah.
Come back again.
All right.
Thanks.